Welcome to the Provo Municipal Council meeting this evening. We've assembled here at the City Center Municipal Council Chambers at 351 West Center, Provo, Utah, and it's 5:35. We welcome you all here. We'd like to go ahead and, this meeting is being broadcast live on the web at Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it also will be available on on-demand viewing. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices, being respectful to others, and refraining from applause or other outbursts during the proceedings of the meetings. We'd like to start our meeting with a roll call. So Cliff.
George Stewart.
Kay Van Buren.
Gary Winterton.
George Handley. Wayne Parker.
Thank you. We'd like to note that Chair Dave Harding is out of town, and also Mr. David Sewell, a member of the council, is out of town. So that's why I'm sitting in this chair, and our numbers are a little smaller up here tonight. Would like to have an opening prayer, and we've asked Mr. Carl Barker, to give our opening prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this day. We are so grateful that we can be here and participate in this, and please help us get home safely as we return this evening. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you. And then Mr. Lance Reynolds is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Can everyone please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and we'll hear a little bit more about these young men in just a minute. Would first like to have a presentation by, is Karen here? Karen Tapahe.
We're having some technical difficulties, so we're going to probably have IS come up and help us, but we'll get stuff up when it's ready.
Okay. We'll go ahead then with some, we have approval of some minutes. The minutes for May 21st, 2019 council meeting. Are there any objections or changes for those minutes from the council? Since there are none, we'll declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. Now we'll get to these young men, and some older men also. We have a presenter, Mr. Garrett Dutcher, who's going to he's president of the Provo Youth Football, and would like to recognize them, and he's going to make a presentation. And tell us just a little bit about the story and why and what has happened. It's a great example of willingness to support a local need, and it's good to be recognized. So go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. In early May, we run, I'm the president of what we call Provo Youth Football. So it's Provo High boundary kids, and it makes up of a conference that is all of Utah County. And we are our own entity, and so we control not through a particular business that runs a league. We are our own individual, district, we call it. And we had all of our football equipment, helmets, shoulder pads, footballs, pants, lots of things were in a trailer at another member of our board's house right across the street from the new Provo High School. And in the middle of the night, someone came up, hooked up to the trailer, stole the trailer. So the trailer was gone, and over $20,000 worth of football equipment for them was stolen. They found a couple things here or there, and in Murray over Memorial Day weekend, they dumped a few things. A little bit hard to dump a bunch of football equipment and try to sell it. I'm sure the culprits thought it was toys or tools. I mean, there's a lot of construction going on with the new Ivory Home development out west. So that was stolen. We started a GoFundMe. We were on the news for a little bit trying to raise money. We had raised about $2,800 from that. And really, we're, as a board and a committee, we're wondering what we're going to do. Our dynamic in the Provo High School boundary is a little different than the rest of the county in that we have a lot of kids that we scholarship, you know, that can't pay the dues, and so there's a lot of money that goes towards that to ensure that everybody plays. So then having to come up with $20,000 to buy new equipment, you know, was just a task that we were left scratching our head. So word got out on the news, and one of the developers of the Spring Creek project, Brady, who was my brother, okay, who was my brother, reached out and said, hey, you know, the main guy there, Bruce Dickerson, has an idea, because not only it helps our, you know, our dynamic, our you know, people in being able to get some affordable housing, but the different businesses listed there stepped up because they remember their experience of football, playing something and having the opportunity, and didn't want the boys to go without that. And so they were able to step up and donate around just over $15,000 so far, coupled with what we already had. And we did a big carnival a couple weeks ago, and we were able to raise enough to purchase all the new equipment to be able to ensure that they play this year. So that's the nuts and bolts. We wouldn't have been able to be able to do it without those developers and different people on the, we have them listed over here on a board that stepped up and ensured that the boys had the same experience that they had when they were younger. If not, we didn't know what we were going to do. So that's the nuts and bolts of what happened and why we're here.
We congratulate you, young men, to be able to go ahead and play, and thank those that are generous with their time and their money. And
Yeah.
this is a great example of a community and just taking charge and making it happen.
Yeah, it's been amazing. You know, I mean, that is from a lot of us on the board, you know, just especially myself, just sleepless nights going, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? You know, there's a couple hundred people, you know, kids, and then their families, and, you know, I was getting emails and texts and getting blown up. What are you going to do? Well, we got it done. So it's huge for the community, and everybody stepped up, you know, and really came together. It was a good thing for the community.
Right. Comments from council? Gary?
I'm curious. Tell me a little bit more about Provo Youth Football. What is that, and who's involved? Or is it tied to the high school, or help me understand that a little better?
Yes. So what had happened was years and years ago, Park Sportsman ran. You know, everybody signed up and you played based on junior high, and then it went based on high school boundary. And so then what happened, that there was a conference formed across all of Utah County that's all based on your high school boundary. And so Provo Youth Football is the Provo High School boundary kids that play tackle football.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Any other comments? I think it'd be appropriate to get a picture of you guys. So let's have you
Wonderful.
come up in the front here, and the council will join you.
Okay, that would be great.
But they're better looking than we are. Come on, Mayor.
Well, good luck in your season this year, young man. All new equipment. I'd like to make a note that we've been joined by Mayor Kafusi and our council attorney, Brian Jones. We now have, I don't think it's indicated on the screen yet, but, oh, Karen is here now. Sorry. Karen Tapahe has introductions of some new neighborhood chairs, so we'll have her do that now.
Hello, everyone. We're catching up on some elections in neighborhoods, and I just wanted to introduce the two newest ones. Thank you. First of all, the new Foothills neighborhood chair is Ruth Thomas. And there you are. Come on up. Say hi and say a few things about your neighborhood.
Sure. Hi, my name is Ruth Aldridge Thomas. I'm neighborhood chair of the Foothills neighborhood. We're in the competition for the largest geographical area amongst the neighborhoods, so let that be in your thinking cap. I have 2 vice chairs right now, and we're hoping for to recruit a couple of more to represent sort of the disparate areas. We go all the way from Wasatch Elementary School to the state hospital, and almost everything east of 900 East. So as you can imagine, that takes in several different demographics that make up our city. So amongst my vice chairs and I, we've developed kind of a 3-point initial plan of communication, camaraderie, and compassion. The first being kind of a short-term goal to at least let everybody know that there's a neighborhood representation in their area. And we're hoping to reach not only resident homeowners, but non-resident residence owners and renters in our area. Camaraderie then builds off of that, and compassion for each other's kind of living situations speaks to what is perennially the biggest issue in our neighborhood, which is the disposition of housing, be it rentals and owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied housing, and the pursuant legalities and de facto situations that occur in that. In general, I've been really happy to be part of our neighborhood community. We have a lot of really lovely people, and a lot of people that really want to be involved within the neighborhood and the city levels. So that's a little bit about us. In my day job, I'm a strategy consultant for nonprofit and municipal and county governments. And I also moonlight as an organist in Salt Lake. Do I take questions? Any questions?
Comments?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Connect.
Yeah, so yes, you do have a large and diverse neighborhood.
As you know.
Right. So I'm not sure if you were to try to say what is the greatest challenge, is it because the neighborhood is so spread out, or the actual number of doors and people? Because if you get too many people, it gets to be difficult, but if it's also spread out distance-wise, it's difficult. I'm thinking of like the Joaquin neighborhood where there's 14,000 people.
Right.
It's very dense. And maybe it's not that big of an area, but it's just so many people. And so sometimes neighborhoods try to occasionally go door to door and put out a flyer, and that becomes really daunting if you don't have enough help, and if there's either too many doors. So can you give us a little more, how are you trying to handle the challenges of the number and the diversity, and you say you're trying to get more vice chairs to help you in that?
Right, yeah, thank you. So our kind of first approach is using the networks that we have to recruit a vice chair, a participatory vice chair from each one of the kind of sectors. Our second is, and we're working on getting funding for this from the city, developing a neighborhood information postcard that we'll be able to just send out to all the public addresses there with just the basic information like, oh, look, there's a neighborhood program. Here are some of the things we can do. And here's your neighborhood chair's contact information. So at least, even 3 to 4% feedback on those, which is about average, would be more than a tripling of our participation so far. Like our email list is under 40 people, which is kind of dismal. That sort of covers our due diligence, at least, that everybody that checks their mail will know. And then just kind of the network representation. So those are our first 2 steps. To your first question, I think that it's not necessarily the geography itself that's the issue, but it's the different concerns from area to area, like the disparity and the concerns that people have that really kind of makes it challenging. And what do we do to develop a camaraderie amongst people who don't really feel that they live in a neighborhood with anybody outside their kind of 4-block area?
Okay, and one last thing is, I don't know, Karen has a list. We sent out a list of the different HOAs that are in Provo, and some are active, some are not active, but they're kind of a subset of each neighborhood. Yep. And if they're active and doing their due diligence, then they're trying to make life better for the people that live in the HOA, and getting your news put out in their newsletters, going to their neighborhood or their HOA meetings can be a real opportunity, I think, to work together.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. We're certainly looking along those lines, and also to some of the managers of the apartment buildings in our neighborhood. I think most of the people that I've spoken to so far in our neighborhood are sort of open and welcoming toward our student populations as well, and at least willing to listen and dialogue about the concerns that seem to be kind of perennially clashing between those. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Yeah, thank you.
And Ruth came along after we sent out the HOA list, and that's a good reminder that I'll get that back out to her again. And she's been getting their Facebook group going, where the previous chair just didn't have as much of an interest in Facebook. So we're already seeing great improvement. So the next neighborhood chair I want to introduce you to is Eric Chase. The North Park neighborhood chair for the last a little over 2 years was Kirby Snyderman, and he's ditched us for a really great job in Texas. But fortunately, Eric's been a vice chair during that time, and so he's not new to the program, but he's excited to be able to step up and help the North Park neighborhood. And it's nice to see someone who's already been involved, so I'll have Eric come up.
Hi, I'm Eric Chase. Like Karen said, I've been the vice chair for this neighborhood for about the last 2.5 years, and we will miss Kirby. It was real nice having someone who had some expertise, in his job as a planner for Orem. He brought a lot to the table as a vice chair, as a chair. So I'm hoping to step in and pick up some of the things that we've been working on as a neighborhood. Our neighborhood's pretty large geographically too. We go all the way from the old Provo High School all the way down to the Paul Reams Wilderness Park. So it's a pretty big, diverse area, and I think we have some of the best amenities in the city. We have the rec center, we have the new Provo Power Building, we have the Provo River Trail, the new Bulldog Boulevard project, access to the BRT system on University Avenue, and I really appreciate the City Council's continued investment in Central Provo and working with us to keep the central neighborhoods a nice place to live. Do you guys have anything?
Any questions for Eric?
Just wanted to say thank you and give our regards to Kirby if you still talk to him.
Sure. I also want to mention we do have 3 new vice chairs in the North Park neighborhood. Burns Johansson is back here with me today, and also Malachi Hopewate and Matt Jacobs volunteered to serve as vice chairs in our neighborhood, and I'm real glad to have them. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, and thank to those who serve in our neighborhood program. It's a very important part of our city, so thank you. We now reach the time for public comment. As indicated on the screen, eventually, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comments will still be taken following presentation of that item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specified to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Additional time may be given to individuals specifically invited to speak, such as applicants, neighborhood chairs, or others that may be representing additional persons. So please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. And due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. So those who wish to comment during this time are invited to approach the podium.
My name is Jay Goodliff, and I'm a resident of Edgemont neighborhood. I'm here to talk about the sale of Tim Kiwanis Benoist Park. To see what entity has influence or power in government, we figure out what each entity wants and then see what each entity gets through government decisions. We do not worry so much about what people say. Instead, we look at outcomes. In other words, by their fruits ye shall know them. So what did the three entities want with Benoist Park? Provo Parks and Recreation wanted the money for the new soccer complex and to stop taking care of Benoist Park, which was a hassle to them. Provo School District wanted to own Benoist Park with no legal restrictions. The next best option was to own Benoist Park with the legal restrictions. Edgemont neighborhood wanted to maintain city ownership of the park. The next best option was to have a strong legal restriction to keep it a park if the school district owned it. Given what each entity wanted, the outcome where everyone would get something was for the city to sell the park to the school district with legal restrictions. So what did each entity actually get? Provo Parks and Recreation got their money and no longer have to maintain Benoist Park. And the school district got Benoist Park with no legal restrictions. Even though the neighborhood repeatedly expressed their preferences that the park be protected, appearing at numerous meetings, the neighborhood got nothing. The city sold the park and sold it without any legal restrictions. The neighborhood did get a statement of intent from the school district which is, quote, not a contract, nor is it intended to be legally binding, end quote. As far as this decision goes, this shows that Provo Parks and Recreation and Provo School District had influence and that the neighborhood had none. In other words, this was a win-win-lose outcome. As far as words go, city officials said many times that they hoped Benoist Park would remain a park. And the neighborhood did get a bunch of sorries from various city officials when you voted to sell the park without even knowing the full agreement. For those words, I thank you. But actions speak louder than words. And as far as actions go, I thank Council members George Hanley and David Sewell for voting against selling the park without legal restrictions. For city government as a whole, for your actions on Benoist Park and our neighborhood's behalf, in the end, you did nothing to protect us. And so, there is nothing for which to thank you.
If there's no other public comment, we'll now close the public comment. Oh, is there still? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Cherie Glazier, and I'm here for the Terrace development that has been proposed. And as far as my understanding, that it has not yet passed as far as the city council here. Is that correct? Okay. And so it's North Canyon Road. is where that's located, and as you're approaching Provo Canyon. I have been to in a few different settings. One was a neighborhood meeting where there is, as far as everyone there was unanimous that they are opposing this development in our neighborhood for various reasons. And one of those being the construction of the water tank that is proposed. That is very unsettling to most, as we have seen homes that have moved from the zone that they're in on the end. So that is a concern. There's also much concern about the schools. The schools that are already full to capacity, which would most likely bring in many new children, and not to mention the high density, which would bring so much traffic that we cannot handle in that area. It would have a snowball effect, all I'm saying is that we are here to voice that opinion once again, that this is opposed by the majority of the residents there. So,
Thank you. Any other public comment? Therefore, we'll close the public comment period. Our first item is a resolution consenting to the appointment of individuals to various boards and commissions. And Mayor Kafusi, we'll look to you for this.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to this tonight. I'd also like to invite Cameron Martin up to the pulpit with me. He was actually the chair of the Good Governance GGAB Good Governance Advisory Board and played a critical part. Just a little background on this.
Mayor,
Mayor.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you. We're on the boards and appointments commission items, not the.
Okay, so you're next.
Not
Cameron.
Don't go far away, though.
Stay
You'll be
really
right
close.
back.
So let me speak to our boards and commissions. I'm not sure if I see any people in here, but
We do have one who wasn't available during the previous meeting.
Right.
Edgar Escobar is here.
Edgar, hi.
So if we,
Good.
when you're done, if we could give him a chance to introduce himself to the council as well.
Perfect. So the boards and commissions are appointed by the mayor and accepted by the council. The beauty of our government is we try and bring as many citizens to the table as possible on these boards and commissions. They serve terms anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 years. It's all volunteer, so it's greatly appreciated. It helps the city with our public outreach, our transparency, and our public input. There's all kinds of boards and commissions, and for those that would like to apply, we'd love to get you on one. You go onto our website, go to the provo.org, and mayor, a drop-down box will come, and boards and commissions. We have the airport board, the Parks and Rec board, the library board, the TMAC, the Board of Adjustments, Planning Commission. Those are just a few off the top of my head, and they're all staffed by the Provo City citizens. We've filled, I believe, every position at this point. It's been interesting. Usually they can be a little bit tricky to fill, and then we've had a wonderful experience of great public outreach and people wanting to be involved. So it's been fairly easy to visit with people and invite them to serve on these boards. Do you have any questions about our boards and commissions for this upcoming year? Okay, great.
We had a chance to meet a number of them in our session earlier today, so that was good.
And they are just wonderful citizens who want to make Provo better. They give of their time, they of their talents, and they sit on these boards for years, and it's a critical piece of running Provo. Go ahead and come on up, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Edgar Escobar. I was born in La Paz, Bolivia. And then I moved to the United States in 1998. And I live in Provo since 2000. So I've been living in Provo for nearly 20 years already. And when I got Provo, I started working in the construction site, so I work as an employee. And then I worked there for probably 6 or 7 years, and then I started my own company. In 2006, I started my company until the present day. Well, I don't know what else. You have any questions for me?
Go ahead, Gary.
Which board were you being?
Oh, sorry. I am. I think it's in the construction or no.
Building code, okay.
Building code.
Thank you.
Yeah, building something.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
So they're all here.
Okay.
All right, should I go, are you comfortable for me to go ahead and move on then to our next, am I the next item?
This will have a vote, and it's also open for public comment.
Okay.
So we'll turn the mic, if there's anyone that would like to make a comment from the public on this, just state your name, and we've already heard your name already.
Yeah, Ruth Eldridge Thomas, I live in Provo. I noticed that Adam Robertson is on the Airport Commission. Is this the legislator?
Yes.
Are there any conflicts of interest of him being a legislator for the state and also on the Airport Commission?
Brian, we'll look to you on that.
I don't believe so. It's a volunteer position where he's just acting in an advisory capacity to the city. We would expect under the State Ethics Act that if there was a specific topic that came before the library board that was also being dealt with at the state legislative level, and there was a conflict, that he'd need to recuse himself from the board for that specific topic. But otherwise, we're not aware of any conflicts.
Okay, thank you. I'm obviously concerned about kind of diversion of funds to the airport that might come from the state legislature. Thanks.
Any other public comment?
Are we commenting about the Terra Development?
No, this is about the board appointments.
Okay, when will we have an opportunity to
That's not an agenda item tonight. And we had open public comment earlier.
What do you mean earlier?
Earlier in the meeting. And we've closed the public comment now. There will be more opportunity to comment about that.
And when will that opportunity be?
It will be noticed along with our other meetings when that becomes an agenda item or is an item that will come back to the council. Any discussion from the council regarding these board appointments? Okay, so we'll call for a vote on the implied motion to make these appointments. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Now we'll turn some time back to the mayor regarding a resolution supporting the Utah County Good Governance Advisory Board's proposal to include the change of government question on the November 2019 ballot.
Hello, Cameron. Thank you for joining us. One of the busiest men in Provo, and he makes time to come here, so I appreciate it. So I would just like to give you just a brief little update and kind of some background for those that don't know. There has been an idea to change the Utah County form of government. The idea is to go from having 3 county commissioners to having a county mayor and county councilors. Currently, county commissioners serve as both the legislative and executive branches of the county government, and with our county's population booming, many have wondered whether we need to modify the form of government to prepare for future challenges. Several months ago, a group filed a petition to make and put the issue on the ballot and began collecting signatures. Then the county appointed a committee to study the issue. I was asked to serve on that committee. The committee had 15 members with a range of backgrounds from academia, politics, business, and so on. We met often and spent many hours hearing different perspectives from experts and perhaps more importantly from ordinary citizens. It was a surprise to me that at the end of it all, our main recommendations as a committee were unanimous. That's right, 15 people looking at things from different lenses came to the same main conclusion, that the county should switch to having a full-time mayor and 7 part-time county council members. We had considered a variety of alternative forms of government. Under our proposal, 5 of the council members would represent geographical districts and 2 would be at large, representing the entire county, essentially mirroring Provo City's form of government. Now the county commissioners are deciding whether to put the proposed change on the ballot. There has been a little bit of a change to that, even as we stand here tonight. I'm grateful for the chance that I had to participate in this important development. And like I stated earlier, Cameron Martin was the chair of this committee and did a phenomenal job. He actually was the author of the recommendation that was sent to the county commissioners. So I thought he is a great resource and is here to answer any questions or concerns you might have about this recommendation.
Mr. Hanley?
Hi, Cameron. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm fully supportive of this resolution and grateful for the work that was done by the board. For the sake of the public's interest in what the process that the mayor has just outlined a little bit, I just wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that. Billy was described in the paper today as describing the process as rushed, frustrating, and agenda-driven. He questioned whether there is sufficient public support for the council-mayor model and said more discussion is needed on that and other forms of government. That didn't sound like an apt description of what I just heard from the mayor and what I was aware you guys were doing. So I wonder if you want to speak to that and help the public understand a little bit more about how much input has happened and how deliberate this process has been.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Hadley. The process was very open and public, and I should start with the process of selecting members of the committee. And one of the first questions I asked were a couple of key questions. How are you engaged in the petition to change the form of government that was already afoot? And do you have any interest in public office? And that was very important to me, because whether a person in the future wants to change their mind and run for public office, for example, one day I hope maybe to sit at a city council meeting, because I've grown up in that kind of conversation with a father engaged in city municipal government, but not right now. And so that question was put to them, and there was no one yielded that intel to me that they had any inclination of running for a public office pertaining to the county government. So that was important. So I would disqualify that statement that there was ulterior motives by any member of the committee. Now, can opinions change and positions change? That's their right to do that thereafter. But that was important on the beginning in front of it. What was also important was having a public open process. All of our meetings were publicized, noted on the public meeting notification sites, as well as an additional website that we created under the direction of the county, because they at that time did not have the ability to do that in the house. We hosted meetings from North County to South County and engaged hundreds of individuals, both in person and online. And I can unequivocally state that in my recollection of all of those meetings, only 2 individuals actually spoke in favor of keeping the current form of government, that there was a resounding effort, or voice, I should say, overwhelming voice to change, that change is necessary. When you have a county as robust as ours and becoming even more sophisticated in its need to provide services, when you infuse the legislative and the executive branch of function into a body of 3 people, whether they're doing the good work of the public or not, per se, if you have a bad actor, for example, or even if they're good actors. You have a process, while efficient, can you make the argument, it's not very effective because it can be easily manipulated. Just simple math. You have three people, two at opposite ends, who has the power, the person in the middle. And so as that discussion went by, and whether they're having the perception, because of public meeting laws, two of them having a conversation in a hall about something else, the perception is, oh, they're brokering a deal not in the light of day. So we needed, it was evident, a change in structure that would encourage good people to engage and be a part of do their civil obligation to come, to participate, to seek public office, and have good representation and great balances of power. And the recommendation of the body was to change to a mayoral form of government with a county council, 7 members, 5 of which are elected by district, 2 at large, for that representation, for that checks and balance. So I would simply stick to what we did was very transparent, very engaging, and the public did respond in a very positive way towards change is necessary and change is now. Hello, Councilmember Stewart.
Chairman, what happened with why does what Commissioner Lee and his 4 cohorts did today, why does that derail what's happening with your group?
Oh, I don't necessarily think it derails it. It was a recommendation that we were charged to come up with, to do our due diligence, make a recommendation to the commission. Again, you have a 3-member commission. To make any movement and vote, you just need the 2. Again, speaking to why that is a form that needs better address. But people have their rights, Councilmember Stewart, and I can't speak to their motives or what their intents are, but any attention, frankly, that can come to this issue, I think is good, so that the public is aware and they have a chance to engage and come into their own understanding and hopefully have the right or the opportunity to vote sooner than later.
Sunlight Tribune article sounded like what they did puts aside what's being done by your group.
Our group was charged to do some research and public engagement with the hope to do some other things we did not have time to speak to his point of we ran out of time. We were given a clock, and there were a lot of busy people who we engaged, and we said, this is the clock. Are you able and interested to engage in that time frame? They said yes. So in our report, we note what we did and did not do, and that there are additional discussions on cost and districting, which great other people can do. The county officials said that they have a lot of that already understood and they can move forward. So to that point, we did the primary task. And to what you're trying to say, did it derail us? No, because we've already completed our task, which was, should the form of government be changed? And if so, to what? We answered that, yes, it should, and we said to what?
The fact they filed a petition, does that give them precedence? Is that the issue?
I can't speak to that. I would look to counsel or...
I understand. I'd like to know. I've had people ask me that question.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the county attorney, Mr. Levitt, has indicated that as far as they're concerned, that this petition essentially preempts the county commission from voting on putting those recommendations to the voters.
Since they hadn't voted on it and they put the petition in ahead of the vote.
Right, and so the question really out there now is, what was the rationale for it? Is there potential litigation available to anybody to say that this was obstruction of the process that was underway? Those kinds of questions. Somebody above my pay grade has to decide those kinds of things, but. The reality is that if the petition is allowed to play out, that if that question were to go to the voters and to be voted on, the county residents and county commission could not consider changing anything for another 5 years after that.
So it was the filing of the petition that made the difference.
Yes, it's preempted them from being able to vote. Now, I think that the question I think the county commissioners are asking, Mr. Ivy and Mr. Ainge are asking is, is that hard and fast? It's my understanding that the county attorney is saying that it is hard and fast, they can't do anything about it. But I think that's really a question for those two commissioners to see if there's maybe some different legal advice that they can get on that question.
Mr. Connect.
If the new petition does not get enough signatures to actually get something on the ballot, do we still have options?
Not in time for 2019.
Right, so
because the petition, if it's allowed to play out, I mean, if I were advising you as a council or advising the mayor, if it was my role to do that on this question, and we had standing, I would advise if I were advising, say, the other two commissioners, I would advise them to seek an injunction and see if that could be overturned, given the process that had played out and given that it could be construed as a filibuster, as obstruction of the process that the county commission had been expected to entertain just an hour later. That's a legal question for them to consider. It's my understanding that if the petition is allowed to continue, they have till sometime in January, which puts it too late to put it on the 2019 ballot, obviously. And then if that did not get the vote in 2020, or the ballot petition failed or whatever, the county commission could still take these recommendations and vote on them and ask it to be put on the ballot for 2020. But it does delay the process. It does put off by even a couple of years the ability of the county form of government to change.
So let's say next February, the county commission decides to hold another vote to see about getting on the ballot next year, and an hour before the vote,
This apparently is a loophole that appear maybe in the state law, and so I think the question really needs to, at some point, be elevated to the legislature and say, how do you fix this if somebody who is opposed to a change of form of government, every time a ballot petition period ends, if the first thing they do is put out the next petition, then when does the actual commission get to vote on the question? So I think this was probably an unintended consequence of the legislation that's in place.
If I may, Councilmember Connect, I've had conversations with multiple state legislators today over this action, and they're exploring various options because there's a shared sense of urgency and need of change. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Winterton?
What is the county budget?
That's a great question that I do not know.
I look at our $254 million budget here in our county, and I would really be uncomfortable with one or two people spending that type of money. And when I think of what the county is and where they've gone, their budget, I'm very uncomfortable with the lack of representation. I am so supportive of this resolution that, to me, this is I think it's very unfair. This is a perfect example of why we need this, because I am very frustrated that this is not going to be given, that the people are not going to be given an opportunity to see this and talk about this more. The process has been going on wonderfully, and now we still have 4 more months to even debate this. And I think that this is so important for our county, not only the cities of each county. I mean, this affects us so much as a city. And as I look at each individual city in the county, this is critical in my mind.
Councilmember Winterton, thank you. Your sentiment was echoed by many citizens at large, as well as county employees who were folks at all stages of the county organization, from department heads to those who just managed various aspects of the county portfolio. Your sentiment was echoed by them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you for your time, and thank you for considering this resolution. I think it's important because it's a message, and we should bring it to more discussion, more debate, and to the attention of our citizens so that they can be informed at the polls when that happens. Thank you.
Can I ask you a couple more questions, Mr. Van Buren?
Comment, but we can come back, or you can go right now.
Well, you're here. I just like to, how many forms of government did you look at? I love this form of government in Provo. I think it's very well representative.
There's basically 4 forms. So you have a 3-member commission, a 5-member commission, a 3-member commission, which are full-time, 3 individuals, what we currently have. You have a 5-member part-time commission, which is what this latest petition is for. Then you have basically a mayoral council form of government. It's called a county executive form, but we, in our recommendations, that gets lost in translation. So we've talked about it as a mayoral form, and then a manager form of government, which is similar to what you would have in Orem, where you have a full-time administrator who would work with the council and the elected mayor, but the mayor would be part of the council.
So the mayor would be part of the council.
In a manager form.
In a manager form, exactly like we have in Provo. Is that what I'm saying?
No, in Orem.
In Orem.
The mayor form of council is what you have here.
Yes.
A strong mayor, so it's a full-time mayor, and he or she can have a deputy mayor, and then the council is part-time, 7 people who are part-time who represent the various areas. It is what you have here in Provo.
Okay.
Cam, I just want to thank you for all the time. I know how busy you are and all that you do.
We're all busy. So are you. Thank you for your time and your service. Thank you.
It's tragic to see what happened, quite frankly. We hope this resolution will help solve the issue with all the work that's been done, and it's been Herculean what you've done. So thank you.
You're kind. Thank you.
Is there anything else that we can do, that I can do personally? This is very important to me.
Well, you all have a network, a social network, or engagements that you engage with people within the community. I encourage you to have that conversation. Share your opinion, but also share the facts. Their website is still live. It's utahcountyfuture.org, utahcountyfuture.org. And at that, there's the final report and recommendations. Allow people to come to their own understanding, but I would talk about it. People get city government much better than they do county government because it's kind of an invisible organization, if you will, in many ways. It's a critical element of our community. And so more attention that can be brought to it, I think the better. Thank you.
Just one final question.
Go ahead, Dave.
So you mentioned that you considered the various types of government, and here we have someone saying that they would prefer a 5-member council.
Mm-hmm.
And what were the definitive or final reasons why you dismissed that as an option?
The committee discussed the various options, and there was a couple of ways that they wanted a full-time champion, a mayor, somebody who could engage and represent the interests of the county. And they felt that having that person who is elected by the people to give that representation and be that champion was very important, which is not necessarily afforded in the 5-member commission. They may be a chair, but and that chair would then rotate as it does currently among the 3. Who's the chair, who's what? It's ambiguous. People through this process wanted clarity, and they wanted to know who's that champion that they would elect and hold accountable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This item is open for
Can I
public.
just
Go ahead,
add one
Mayor.
more thing really quick? Just echo what Dr. Martin said, but also you elected those county commissioners as individual citizens. So you can reach out to them, just like we get people reaching out to us every day on a daily basis. You elected them, so don't hesitate to reach out to them and give your feelings and thoughts.
Thank you. This is open for public discussion. If there's anyone from the public that would like to comment regarding this item, now's the time.
Pam Jones, Edgemont neighborhood. As I understand it, you're talking about a 7-member council or commission, something like Provo City has with 5 regional members and 2 at large. What are the criteria for determining the districts?
Mayor, do you want to answer that? You're on the-
That would be broken up, similar to how we do it, decided on population and demographics, what they would do, and that's been half the battle. As we've held all these meetings, everyone feels underrepresented with just the 3. It would be broken up in populations, and then the 2 countywide would be just exactly how we run ours.
Okay, since most of the population of the county is in Provo and Orem, are they going to be split up
They
to
probably-
even it out with the little smaller cities?
They probably would. I mean, they've put up actually a couple mock-ups the county has of how they would do it. We don't have a say-so over that. That wasn't our task. But they did show us a couple different concepts. And yeah, they absolutely had to come into Provo and Orem and scoop out and have another come in to give it a more equal representation.
If I may, perhaps when the speaker is finished, I could walk through the 6 recommendations, and that may answer some of the questions.
Okay, that's all I wanted to ask.
Okay. Would that be appropriate, Mr. Chair?
Hi, go ahead. Is there any other public comment? Okay, maybe Mr. Strachan, do you want to do that?
Okay. And Hannah, would you follow along as we move down the list? So number 1, as you've already heard, would be a mayor-council form of government with 5 regional representatives and 2 at large. And the second would be to hire a chief administrative officer to aid in the day-to-day, in other words, a professional manager to help manage the county. The third one would be to have the special election in November. The fourth one is to establish, and this is what comes to the districting, that is to establish a nonpartisan committee to follow state and federal guidelines to come up with the geographic boundaries for the 5 districts, and then of course there would be public engagements involved in that process. This is one of the points of pushback that came from some of the state or the county employees, particularly the auditor's office and the legal office, and they were worried about the time involved. But the reality is they would still have to put, if this were to be on the ballot, they would actually have to start work on the redistricting or the districting of these jurisdictions prior, basically start by about January, because I think early in the spring, by about March, they have to have the proposed districts. Number 5 is to figure out, to have them work on a compensation committee to figure out, what costs are going to be covered and what to pay the various elected officials and the CAO, et cetera. And number 6 was to engage in the educating the voters on the mayor-council form of government and how it all works. Now, the resolution itself contemplates the comments made by the clerk auditor in terms of the costs and timing, and it advocates for providing the resources that are needed for the county to properly pull this off in November, and again in November 2020, when you'd actually have the election for the elected officials. And then scroll down a little bit further, please. Right down to the resolution itself. So so what this resolution calls for is that the council supports the findings and recommendations of the Utah County Good Governance Advisory Board, urges the County Board of Commissioners to take all appropriate and necessary measures to fully implement the 6 recommendations, and to appropriately and necessarily fund the additional resources needed to meet the obligations. And then part of this resolution, and we would share it with all the various entities and elected officials in the county. And what we would hope from this is also that other cities and jurisdictions in the county will do similar resolutions and make known to the Board of Commissioners of what the will of all these and other elected officials are with regard to this question.
Thank you, Mr. Strachan. Any other comment and discussion from the council? Mr. Parker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Winterton's question. The county's total budget is about $400 million. It's a little deceiving, though, because $237 million are pass-through sales tax receipts that go to UTA or to MAG or to other entities. So their operating budget's about $164 million, and the balance is really pass-through transportation sales tax dollars. So just gives you a sense of scale.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. If there are no other discussion, I'd just like to state that in our work meeting earlier, we had a discussion about this, and the council together is very supportive of standing behind this advisory board and supporting this change. And we want to be very firm and vocal and very supportive of this and give that message to the county commissioners. So we'll go ahead and, if there are no other comments, we'll go ahead and have a vote on this implied motion. All who in favor of this, please so. And that's unanimous. We thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Martin.
I have a question now. This is by the council. Mayor, should this be a joint resolution? Could we, or what? I appreciate, I know where you stand, I believe, on this, and I wondered if we wanted to make this a joint, or should it be just from the council?
My name is already attached to our recommendation, which is basically a resolution with teeth in it, but I would be fine to sign this as well if you would like me to.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Jones, since we already voted on the resolution as is, if we change this to a joint resolution, what would the procedure be?
Well, what we'd probably need is a motion to reconsider that action and then a motion to change this to be a joint resolution. Recognize also that it's already Provo City practice, even though it's not necessary to have the mayor sign resolutions. It's already Provo City practice to have the mayor sign the signature sheet for every resolution. So if that's considered sufficient, one option is to just go forward, and the mayor's going to end up, I presume, signing the signature sheet, and when it's sent to the county, you could send it that way as well. But otherwise, you probably need to reconsider the motion just approved and then make a substitute motion to change this to a joint resolution.
I apologize that I didn't think of that before, and I'm fine with that because I know where the mayor stands, and I know that she will be vocal on this issue as well. So I'm fine with staying where we were at.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have that vote and the resolution stand as is. And
Yeah, and you might just invite the mayor to send a cover letter along with this endorsing it as well.
Thank you.
thank you, Mayor. Thank you. We'll now go to item 5, which is a resolution authorizing submission of a final urban deer control plan and authorizing the request for the certificate of registration from the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. And Camille Williams, Senior Assistant City Attorney, will lead this discussion.
Thank you. May I reintroduce the council to Wes Alexander, perhaps invite him to come up in case questions come his way later. He's a wildlife biologist for the Division of Wildlife Resources, and he'll correct me if I've introduced him wrong. And he has particular responsibility related to urban deer control plans. And he's been a tremendous resource to us as we've applied for a certificate of registration and as we've sent to the state our proposed urban deer control plan. So in this public hearing on the proposed urban deer plan and resolution authorizing that submission to the state, my understanding is that the council would also be taking up whether or not to appropriate funding for this urban deer control program, and would also be approving, at least in its general form, a contract with Humphreys Archery to act as the entity to carry out the plan primarily. So let me summarize the plan. There are more detailed requirements listed in the core, but I won't go over those details. We could move to the next slide. We have had our first certificate of registration. Oh, I could move it. Thank you. Thank you. Our first core was 2016 to 2019. We had lethal and non-lethal removal. We are moving to a plan that is lethal only. This time we will also have archery, but rather than trap and translocate, we will have trap and euthanize. And rather than testing for chronic wasting disease, only the non-lethally taken animals, as in the prior plan, all harvested animals 1 year of age and older will be tested for chronic wasting disease. And while a good deal of the reason for that first plan dealt with residents and the damage to residential property and was complaint-based in terms of how we located the harvest sites, it appears now that there's a greater focus on public safety issues and in working to remove the deer that seem to be crossing our roadways for those roads that are high speed. North University Avenue, 9th East, North Canyon Road, and South State Street on the way to Springville.
Camille,
Yes.
just for on the public record, can you tell us why we have gone away from the translocate to trap and euthanize?
I don't know whether Wes wants to address that.
I think it would be helpful.
Here, this spring, the decision was made by the Division of Wildlife to discontinue this portion of the program. It is no longer an option. One of the main reasons behind that is concerns with chronic wasting disease, spreading this to other areas. So we're no longer moving animals for that reason.
Thank you.
This is a very brief summary. I don't know whether there's other information you would like presented at this meeting, where the meeting has been noticed and the agenda packet has been available.
I think you're fine. And we'll have a public discussion. If they have questions, we might have some more discussion then.
Thank you.
We'd like to invite anyone from the public now for this. This is a public hearing, so there'll be discussion from the public if anyone is interested. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and come back to the council for council discussion. That's a quiet room. We had Mr. Hanley.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add a little commentary from our discussion earlier. I think it might be helpful for the public, and maybe just to echo what Ms. Williams was just explaining, but the emphasis now on public safety, I think, is crucial to understand that this is, I think as far as I'm concerned, accidents and fatalities of deer, and of course the potential damage to human life and property in such accidents is of primary concern, and reduction of that risk, I think, is a positive. That said, I think we live in a area of the state where, and we share this with every place else along the Wasatch Front, where we're on the interaction zone with wilderness, and so I think there's some interaction with deer and with other animals that we should expect and learn to live with. So this isn't, as far as I'm concerned, a program that's designed to eliminate the deer population entirely, or to, and this of course also is a program that has limited impact because of state and federal policies that interface with what we're able to do as a city. So I think it's important for the public to recognize that, A, we have to learn how to live with deer. B, we have limited authority over the deer population per se, and power to influence that, and that finally this is a program that's really aimed at reducing risks to public safety and damage to property, and I think it's so far been quite effective to that end. But hopefully people understand that those are the objectives, and that this does not eliminate all risk altogether. It doesn't eliminate all the deer, and that there not only are there limits imposed upon us by other agencies and by nature itself, but also limitations on how much money we can spend on this and get our bang for our buck, so to speak, in terms of reducing accidents. But I'm supportive of it. With those limitations front and center, knowing that there's only so much we can do, but we should do something to help. But beyond that, I think it's important that we recognize some of those limitations.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. Any other comments? Mr. Knick.
So can we bring up the resolution and make sure it's got the language we had agreed on?
Thanks, Mr. Connect. And Hannah, I was just going to make the procedural comment for the public that the version that is actually now the subject of the implied motion is slightly different from the version that was available in the online materials earlier because of the changes that were made in work session today. So, for instance, the first paragraph from lines 9 through 11 has actually been changed, and the amount of the appropriation was changed as well during the work session.
Just making sure the dollar amount was changed too, and looks like that's current. Everything's good. Any other discussion from the council? If not, we have an applied motion on this resolution. So all those in favor, please. And are there any opposed? I guess not. We all approved it. So that's unanimous. Thank you, and thank you, Camille. Our next item is an ordinance amending Provo City Code to establish a Division of Community and Neighborhood Services and Department of Development Services. And this will be presented by Mr. Wayne Parker, the Chief Administrative Officer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. The The proposal before you is to make changes to the city code in Title II, which is the government organization title in the municipal code, to essentially affect the change that was recommended by the mayor and discussed during the budget process this year. This would take the Office of Economic Development, the Redevelopment Agency, the Community Development Department, and combine them and then divide them into two different departments. The Department of Development Services would be the new department under this scenario, and would consist of economic development, the tax increment portion of the redevelopment agency as it currently exists, and building inspections. And so the idea generally, and current planning, short-range current planning. So the idea of this is to provide one vertical in which all development review happens. And so it would be one department director, one department that would be responsible for development, attraction, financing, and review, and permitting, and issuing building permits and certificates of occupancy. The other department would be kind of a reformulated community development department that'd be called Community and Neighborhood Services, to kind of avoid the development terminology existing in two different departments. And Community and Neighborhood Services would include parking management, the city ombudsman, zoning enforcement, as it currently exists in that department. We would move the federal funding components of the current redevelopment agency into the new Community and Neighborhood Services Department. And then we would retain long-range planning in that functional area. And so the idea there would be to create some separation from the development approval process and long-range planning and the other functions of the new department that would be much more focused on neighborhood-related programs. Again, it's not the council's neighborhood program, but would be programs that are really designed to support residents and neighborhoods in the city. And so the Title II amendments that you have before you now are designed to do that. As we indicated earlier today, there are other provisions in the code that we'll need to work through. Title IV we talked about during the work meeting today, where we've got to make a couple of changes there that will be done in concert with other changes being proposed for Title IV. And over time, we'll work through predominantly Title 14 and 15, which really refer in large measure to community development, and we'll need to turn around and change some of that terminology. But our intent is to do that over time as we implement the new department. So during the budget process, you approved the budget changes that were necessary for this department. We are in the process of recruiting and selecting a new department director for that role. Applications closed about 10 days ago. We have 13 finalists who have now submitted responses to a supplemental questionnaire. We formed a screening committee representing the development community, the other cities, as well as internal functions of the city, who will screen that number down to a smaller number in which they will conduct then the first round of interviews, proposing then to screen down further to a smaller group that the mayor will be able to select from. And so that process is well underway. So tonight is really just putting all the pieces to the puzzle in place to make the change in the department structure work. So I'd be happy to go through the code specifically. We did go through it in some detail in the work meeting 2 weeks ago. And so again, we're happy to answer any questions you might have about that or entertain any comments from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. This is open for public comment. If any of the public would like to comment regarding this ordinance change, you're welcome to approach the podium. All right, we'll bring it back to the council. Mr. Parker's offered to give more information if we have questions for discussion. Seeing none, I just want to say that I think this is going to be a great change, and when the mayor proposed it in her State of the Union, or State of the City,
It's our union.
I was excited. It's taken time to work out a lot of these details, and they're all not quite there, but we're going forward now with it. So if there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and have a vote on the implied motion. All in favor of this ordinance? Thank you, and that's unanimous. Thank you, Wayne. Our seventh item is an ordinance to amend the Provo City Code to amend the title, purpose, and objectives to the 50 East Project Redevelopment Option Zone, Spring Creek neighborhood. And Mr. Robert Mills from Provo City Planning will be the presenter.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to come before you and explain a little bit about this ordinance, the amendment. As we discussed in work meeting today, the applicant in a previous meeting requested a zone change to the this particular pro zone when it was previously titled the 50 East Project Redevelopment Zone. That title referred to a previous project that had been approved several years ago relating to a specific location in Provo. To make it relevant to the applicant's project and to make sure that there are abilities in the future to replicate this zone if there are other projects that would benefit from the specific development standards in this zone. The applicant proposes to rename the zone the entry-level housing project redevelopment zone, and also amended the purpose and objectives to apply generally to this type of housing if it should be located in any part of the city. The other thing that it does amend is adds in the permitted uses single-family dwellings attached, since that's the type of units that would be proposed. So Planning Commission recommended approval of this, and I'm available for any other questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Mills? Guess not.
Okay.
The applicant, is he here? Brady, you're here. Would you like to make any comments? Okay. We also have Mary Miller, from the neighborhood chair. Ms. Miller, would you like to make any comments regarding this?
As I was reading through the code, as it previously existed and everything else, it said something about a neighborhood meeting within 2 weeks prior to this being adopted. We have not done that. I don't know that we need to do that, and let me explain why. When the meeting was held with the neighborhood, the bottom line was it came out that we need this is good, we were for the MDR, and realized at that point that with MDR and with the asking of the applicant for fewer parking spaces, that we would have to depend on the integrity of the people who end up purchasing those homes as single-family homes. But to make that an even better situation, the applicant has the development agreement, and I think with this particular reorganization of that section of city code, I think it takes care pretty much of the concern for the parking as it stands or as it will be. So I think it's fine to do this. If I'm wrong, you certainly have the power to let me know that. Additionally, the only other thing we would ask, as we spoke with the developer, we talked about the name of this being not necessarily that goes into this ordinance, but the documents that will ultimately apply to this ordinance. The project itself originally started as Slate Creek, and in speaking with the developer, we asked if that could just say Spring Creek.
since it's in our neighborhood. So the only thing I'm going to ask now that I hope is a part of the public record is that someone take the time to go through the development agreement and all of the other things that stand as legal documentation of this development and make sure that that little change is noticed and dealt with. So not Slate Creek, but rather Spring Creek. So and that's all we have.
Thank you. Mr. Winterton.
I just have a question for Brian. This probably, we're not changing a zone, we're just renaming a zone, because I don't want to affect that development agreement. Are we changing it, or creating a new zone that we need to attach a development agreement to this new zone? Or does the old zone that we're actually doing, I just don't want to create any loopholes for any changes to that development agreement.
Unfortunately, I guess I'm unaware of the development agreement that you are speaking about. The rezone last week didn't say anything about a development agreement.
Now, isn't there a development agreement with this? I thought there was, and so I just don't want to create a new zone that is going to affect that development agreement and make sure that it tags along with the renaming or a new zone with that.
And has that development agreement already been executed? Well, I don't think there's anything, in our typical template, there's nothing in the development agreement itself that says anything about the name of the zone. It simply talks about a vesting ordinance that is the one that rezones the property. So I think that would apply regardless of the name of the zone to the ordinance approved 2 weeks ago. And this leads to the question that I raised in the work session, which is that the ordinance that passed 2 weeks ago purported to rezone the property to be the entry-level housing project redevelopment zone, which at this particular moment in time does not exist. It won't exist until you approve this text amendment. Because right now, you have a 50 East project redevelopment option zone on the books. That's not what the ordinance 2 weeks ago said you were rezoning the property to. So that's why, as we discussed in the work session, I recommended to the mayor that she not sign the previous rezone ordinance until after this one is passed, so that this one actually becomes legally effective before that one, despite the fact that you voted on it in the previous meeting. So I don't think that creates any loophole. If you've looked at the zone language, you're not just changing the name of the zone. You're also adding single-family dwellings as a permitted principal use and making some slight tweaks to the purpose and objective section of the zone. None of that, I think, affects the development agreement. Especially to the degree that that agreement has not yet been entered into. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Knight?
So in some respects, I think we kind of got the cart before the horse, and this is getting it back where it ought to be, because we're putting the zone in place with the correct name and everything, so I think we're in good shape.
Okay, and as we mentioned in work meeting, this item is one of those items that if any council member wants to have a second meeting with this, it can do that with just expressing from one person. Is there anyone in the council that has that desire? Brian? Yeah.
Let me just interject again, though. I apologize for this, making this so complicated, but having not been here at the previous meeting, I don't know what the discussion about the development agreement was, but what I noticed when I was approving the ordinances from last time is that the ordinance that you approved did not mention a development agreement. So if the intent was for the zone to not be effective until the development agreement was signed, that's not what the ordinance says. And the ordinance that was approved would implement the new zone as soon as it goes into effect, which is going to happen either when the mayor signs it or by July 17th, which is 15 days after it was submitted to her. So So I guess we face a little bit of a legal conundrum here, where if the council's intent was that the rezone not take place unless the development agreement was signed, we either need to get the development agreement signed before July 17th, or the council needs to hold a special meeting before July 17th and reconsider that approval in order to undo it.
Tell us what we should do.
Don't stop there.
I see that it's submitted there, but see, this is something that we need to fix in the process of development agreements. The actual ordinance needs to be different when there's a development agreement. And I was never informed before, well, in fact, I didn't even review the ordinances for this meeting because I was out of town. But what was never done was updating the ordinance to be the development agreement version of the ordinance. So the ordinance that was passed 2 weeks ago simply says the rezone is approved. So I guess so the question, I guess, becomes, what are the chances of getting it signed and executed before July 17th? Okay. So, I mean, my recommendation, assuming you have confidence in the administration and that the mayor is amenable to this, my suggestion would be have the mayor not sign the rezone until the development agreement is signed, but understanding that needs to happen before July 17th. And if everybody's confident in that happening, we should all be good.
And I would just add, help.
It's okay.
Brian, if for some reason the mayor, if we didn't get the thing signed by the 17th, then she could veto.
Correct. And then you could readdress it and fix everything in the next meeting in the response to the veto.
Okay.
The developers submitted the development agreement to us themselves. I have every confidence that they'll sign it tomorrow. In this case, it's very important because the zone that you're looking at would allow for a lot higher density and a lot less parking than what they've agreed to. So the development agreement is essential.
And Brian, if we pass this ordinance, the mayor can go ahead and sign this one. We want this one signed before the other one anyway.
Correct.
Right?
This one should be signed immediately so that it
So
takes
that
effect
earlier
first.
discussion doesn't have anything to do with really signing this one.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion, council? This is an applied motion then, so we'll call for a vote on the implied motion. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. I think, is that the last one? Yeah.
The other three are continued.
If there's no objection, then we'll now adjourn the council meeting by unanimous consent. Thank you for being in attendance.